Just to give a background who I am, there's some of the members around the table that don't know me. I was at the RSMTS Training Centre until August last year. I joined in 1981 as a national serviceman. When Jeff spoke about 72 Mott Brigade, I was there in June, July as a national serviceman where I assisted with the buffels that had to go up to Ops Protea. Same as one-on-one workshop, but obviously after August 81, I joined as an apprenticeship. I then did a jails course that was basically in line with the colonel next to me. While he was doing the officers course, I was doing the RNCO's course. And then I started my apprenticeship in 1982. 83, I was at one-on-one workshop, worked on a buffel project. We had plus minus 90 buffels on the tarmac. Those that know that area very well. We had over Easter weekend we had to repair all those vehicles, and the logistics around that with all, taking out engines, taking out the sending them to the different workshops, getting it back, refitting it, sleeping at the vehicle, eating, staying right there for that 5 days. So I had a bit of that experience that I've heard here. Just to get back to the presentation, I was in training for about 15 years, and then 97, Colonel van Wyken then took me up with Sergeant Major Johnny Nelson to the HQ where we were, myself and Sergeant Major Nelson was Johnny, I can't call you that, John, was responsible for the apprentice training. I stayed there for 22 years. Where I managed the apprentice training. I was very fortunate to serve on various South African Department of Higher Education boards. I was part of the development of the new petrol, diesel and small engines qualification. I also served on NAM, National Artisan Moderation Bodies Committee. So the presentation I'm going to do with regards to the training, I'm sure I can give the proper information. Then the second part of that is where Colonel Ralph would have come in about the allowances, but I was also part of those work groups. So I can relay the information quite clearly. So if I'm just going to jump that. I don't have to give the aim. It's a busy slide that I just want to focus quickly, firstly on the national part, and then obviously on the SANDF part. A lot of the members around the table would have, especially industry, would know exactly what I'm speaking about. Jeff, you're very pro on all these things. As you see in the company-specific, pre-1922, company-specific apprentice contracts, that carried on actually right up until 1981. If you look at ESCO, the post office, the railway, each had their own apprentice system that they managed. And they gave their own names to their own trades at some stages. 1981, the Manpower Training Act 56 of 81 was introduced, which obviously allowed black workers to enter into apprenticeships. The apprenticeship focus was permitting to other skills as well. And then the ITBs, where the Motor Industries Training Board was also established from 1981. And they regulated the whole training within the national sphere, if I can call it that. Going back to the Defence Force, we were doing our own thing. The Defence Force Act 44 of 57 enabled the minister to train autonomously, was permitted to establish own occupations, including trades like the vehicle fitter. We're still sitting with that problem today. A lot of artisans that qualified in the Defence Force as vehicle fitters looking for jobs outside are now going back to the Defence Force and says, but they don't know what, the industry doesn't know what a vehicle fitter is, because a vehicle fitter was effectively petrol, diesel. We worked on anything that was related to that. So there's a lot of the artisans now still phoning the Army HQ to try to get their trade test certificate altered to petrol or diesel mechanics. That will always be a problem. Then we basically had what we call the Technische Reglement. It was little orange books that guided us with regards to the apprentice system. In 1998, we had a SANFO, South African Defence Force order that was established, where we got 76 trades within the DoD. Typically now, a photographer in the Air Force or in the engineers was deemed to be a trade. KMO was deemed to be a trade. So those were all listed as part of the 76 trades, which will give us a problem when the Skills Development Act was introduced in 1998. So we had 76 trades listed in the Defence Force. In the TSC, we typically had a system where we had 240 posts at TS Training Centre. When TS Training Centre migrated to 61 base and became a DoD TS Training Centre, they upped the amount of posts. I think Colonel Slubbard was working directly with that. He would have given more information. He can give more information about that. But the idea is that you 240. Why 240? You would have 2 intakes per year, 80, and then 80 qualifying. So you would always have this influx of apprentices into the system. Then 1994 came, and then we were dumped with integration apprentices, around about 1,800. Now we couldn't train that apprentices at Verwoerdburg Technical College like it was known, Tshwane South at this stage. We had to use other regions, colleges, that we went around to all the colleges, like in Bloemfontein, we went to Durban, we went to Cape Town. Typically in Bloemfontein, Colonel Solly Bekes had the most amount of APPIs that were trained at those colleges. The problem we had was practical, giving the guys practical exposure. Because at that stage, the transformation of a lot of the second and fourth line repair, second line and fourth line repair went to industry. So what happened at the workshops, LWTs, the workshops, obviously, the command workshop ceased to exist, and you had these technical maintenance service centers, which means that 1,800 APPIs had nowhere to go to get practical exposure. So we sat with a tremendous problem, and besides that, as you know, the members sitting around the table, and you were an APPI in the Defence Force or in the TSC in the Army, to become a Lance Corporal, after 1 year, you become a Lance Corporal. After 2 years, you become a full Corporal. The day you qualified, you're eligible to become a Sergeant, you get put into a Sergeant's post. So we sat with all these guys with no posts. So how do you promote them? That's just that part. I can speak hours, so I don't want to waste your time. Just want to give you a glimpse at what we had. Then we had the Defence Act of 42 of 2002 that tried to take us back to the skills, the 1995 when the NQF was established, and 98 the Skills Development Act. That Act 42 of 2002 tried to link us into that, which means we were starting to fall within the higher picture of the national picture. We could not do our own apprenticeships, and we can't give out our own certificates. We had to work through the national system. I'll explain that in the next slide. So obviously you had in that line, 94, 95, the South African Qualifications Authority Act was established, 98, the Skills Development Act. I can just explain, the Skills Development Act brought in a thing they called learnerships. We were used to apprenticeships, they brought in a learnerships, and the learnerships deemed a big problem, not just for the Army, for the whole industry. Because the industry was not in line to take this animal. Because it was mainly based on other occupations. It wasn't based on trades. So you were sitting with the Skills Development Act. And then in 2008, they brought in what we call, a lot of you will have to look around the pay stick. 2008, they brought in the Skills Development Amendment Act, which brought in the OFO, which is the Organisation Framework of Occupations. And then we had to align our trades. Now we had to take those 76 trades and put it into the Manpower Training Act was plus minus 46 trades. So we had to align that. They don't know what's an armourer. They don't know what's a vehicle fitter. They don't know what is electronic weapon fitter, because electronic weapon fitter is not an electronic technician like you've got in industry. So we had to align those trades. I sat for hours in work groups trying to see where we can align ourselves within the occupational framework. And that led us to changing the armourer trade, the armament fitter trade, and electronic weapon fitter trade to become one trade, which we call a combat weapon fitter, which is the trade called now, but I'll get to that just now. Typically what happened in industry, you had Section 13 trade test, which was the old apprentice system. Apprentices did a CBM3 competence-based modular training. The SADF adopted that. Our apprenticeship, the way we were doing it in-house, was based on the CBM3. So we're doing exactly the same. But we couldn't go to Olifantsfontein because we were not registered under the Manpower Training Act, under the Apprentice Act. So our apprentices were not registered as apprentices, although we were doing exactly the same trade test even. Because a lot of the guys, our trade tests, if I talk mechanic-wise now, auto electrician, welders and stuff were doing the same trade test that was done at Olifantsfontein. A lot of the testers at Olifantsfontein, some of them came over to Verwoerdburg Technical College as trade testers, and they were doing the trade testing of our people. It was based on the same level. But our trade certificate was an army-based trade certificate. Then members that in the army, let's say I want to do, I've got an army trade test certificate and I want to go and do a trade test at Olifantsfontein. I could go and do it under Section 28. Section 28 means I'm a B grade type of artisan, if I can put it in that terminology. I could go, any person outside, if he had 4 or 6 years experience and was working for class or boss, he could go and say, I did this type of training, and give him something, and he would then be allowed to do a trade or take a trade test with 4 or 6 years experience. So a lot of our artisans went to Olifantsfontein, but they trade tested under Section 28. When the Skills Development Amendment Act came in 2008, we already foreseen this animal that we have to start eating, this elephant piece by piece. We started allowing the SA Army TC APPIs to go and do Section 28 because we did not comply to the Section 13 requirements. After implementation of the Skills Development Amendment Act of 2008, the DOD had to comply and cease to do in-house trade tests and Section 28 trade tests. So what happened now, we had to now get registered through a CETA. The CETAs were established early in before the 2000s, but our CETA being the SAS CETA, so no, we fall under the SAS CETA. The MERS CETA, Jeff, you're right, was the industry outside. All the mechanics in that fell under the MERS CETA. But the Army fell within the security CETA, which we call the SAS CETA. So it included the police, it included the Army, the Air Force, the security companies and that. So we had to go through them. But the SAS CETA was not in line with what the MERS CETA was doing. MERS CETA was focusing on trades. The other SAS CETA comes from the side. They're worrying about other things like the infantry and the security companies and the police. Now we say, but we've got trades as well. So us and the police and the correctional services had a huge problem going, because at one stage I even did a presentation to the RMI, Jeff was then the chair, where we tried to go through them to the MERS CETA to get our trade testing done, if you can recall that. I think it was around about 2008. So I went and did a presentation to them. We went to loads of industries. We went to Centurion, to Mercedes-Benz South Africa and those places to get our apprentices to be registered to take or registered as apprentices, because the SAS CETA was not in place. The challenge that we sat with, that when the Skills Development Act came in, and I think the people that are in industry sitting around the table, if you got an apprentice, your workplace, you still have now to have workplace approval, which means the same equipment used in the trade test center had to be in the workshop. Now think of the Army. We're sitting with mainly 101 workshop, 102. We've got regional workshop Gauteng, and we've got a lot of LWTs. To go and get all that equipment, to get workshop approval is not going to happen. So we were focusing on Bloemfontein, RWG, which is the old 37 field workshop here in Pretoria, as most of you know that. Later Gauteng workshop. We had to structure that to get the workplace approval, which is now not happening again. So the Army is sitting with a huge challenge with regards to workshop approval. So part of that, learners' trade test centers had to be accredited. So if you've got your own trade test center, which they're saying now, you don't go to Olifantsfontein anymore. Anyone can open a trade test center. But National Autism Moderation Body will come and do a site visit. They'll come and accredit you according to the guidelines given in the qualification. So the qualification, the AFO, those areas that you must be trade tested on will be looked at. So what happens now is, in the Army, motor mechanics, no problem. Auto electricians, no problem. Welders, no problem. So your common trades, we can fit somewhere into industry. Now we come to the weapons, ammunition fitters. We mustn't forget them. They're part of the 76 trades. Although they're not deemed as a trade in industry, it wasn't a trade on its own. So we had to now go and see what are we going to do. TS Training Centre was doing armourer trade test. They were doing armament fitter trade test. We got the parachute riggers in Bloemfontein. We were doing the trade test there. The electronic fitters, weapon fitters, were part of the signalers, which also translated to the TSC at a later stage. They brought that trade and said, it's not their trade anymore. We must adopt that trade. So around about 28, we started with this combat weapon fitter trade, which fits nicely into the OFO. We registered as a trade. The parachute rigger was registered as a trade on the occupational framework. Now, trade test center. Before you can start your apprenticeship, your trade test center, according to the National Autism Moderation Body, must be put in place. All the equipment must be put in place. They come and see is the aircon. Now think of 61 base workshop in your mind now. The old armourer workshop or the tank workshop. No aircon. The training facility supposed to look like this. No go. Caravan. So the chances of them getting accredited to do trade testing is thousands, 100,000 rand away. The shooting tunnel is part of the trade test for the combat weapon fitter. The shooting tunnel hasn't been accredited for many years or registered. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. That's just to give you more or less. Parachute riggers in Bloemfontein, we're sitting with exactly the same thing. Okay, this myself and Colonel Ralph, he obviously is the guru when it came to progression. I was part of the work group, so I can give information. Obviously, a lot of you that were in the Defence Force in the Army in 1988, you know Project Dyson. Project Dyson took all occupations to the same. If you are a Staff Sergeant, get a Staff Sergeant salary, and that's how it went. I know a lot of the trades, I think the armament fitters, some of them had some allowance at that stage, but because of Dyson, that was now corrected into saying everyone gets the same. So up from 88, right up until 2006, talking TSC-wise, we were artisan sergeant with all that experience was getting the same enumeration as what the infantry and that. We said no, and a lot of them were leaving to companies. We said we must try and keep these guys, and then we started looking at the technical allowance. The SAF and the Navy, the SAF at the TSIP, everyone that worked on aircraft-based equipment, armourers, the mechanics, the aircraft mechanics and stuff, was given a allowance, which was the TSIP. And in the Navy, the guys on the boats, because obviously you've got the mechanics on the boats and stuff, not the ground-based people, guys on the boats got the naval bonus scheme. They didn't want to, at that stage, get part of this, to be part of our system of getting the technical allowance in place. So 2006, the SA Army granted permission to develop the technical allowance system for the SA Army and left out, obviously, the ground-based, the trades of the SAF, and then obviously the Navy, because they had the TSIP and the naval bonus. So in 2010, the SANDF rejected the OSD. We requested to go over to the interdepartmental occupational dispensation, which would take the artisan and the officer up to, or let's call it the engineer, and those guys and the tradesmen, up to a higher level of salary than what the rest of the people were getting, to keep them, to retain the people. But we had to reject that because the pay progression was not, for the artisan, was a challenge at that stage. 2010, the SA Army implemented the technical allowance with its own challenges. I see my time is restrained, so I'm not going to get into all that, but there was a lot of challenges with that because of the as I explained, the photographer, the guys that did the maps were all trades as part of the 76. When we went over to allowance, I said, no, they don't fall in that category. So we had to relook at that. 2010 to 2022, there were 3 systems running. The TSIP in the Air Force, technical allowance system in the Army, and the Navy, they had the scheme that they were on. 2022, then what we call the MD now, the military dispensation for engineers and the related professions and trades, was implemented. I can actually say I got 16 months of that now, that it was put into my, that it became part of my pension, and I can actually see that compared to other people that retired. The engineers and related professionals has to register at EXA, the Engineering Council of South Africa. I just want to, because most of you are around the office, around the offices, the challenge there, the engineer, the guys that want to register, the officers with their qualifications that want to register must pay that registration annually by themselves, and they don't want to do that. And a lot of them did not go and register themselves or because they have to get a mentor and go through a whole process for registration. So a lot of our technical officers now don't fall within that, they just get a normal officer salary. The combined pay and allowance, as I said now, it became pensionable. I felt it for the 16 months, there definitely was an increase. And this redefined the relationship between the rank and pay progression. What they brought in 4 systems. You know why we call TIFIs, artificer, from the REMI. So TIFI by us now, to be deemed artificer, you must have a rank of staff sergeant, and you must, if you are in the tank environment, you must be qualified. You must have a license for the tank. You must have tank recovery. You must have the tank mechanical course. You must have done some type of thing around the turret with regards to the CBE, the KBE. You know what I'm talking about. Gun control system. You must have had some training around that. You must have done the administration part, and you must be have done the recovery of the tank. That deems you to be an artificer. That's the highest grade of qualification. And under that, the principal artisan, if you've done part of that, under that is what they call a military artisan, which if you've got a SAML course and you've got a SAML license and you're qualified, you are a senior artisan. And then if you are a normal artisan, the day you trade tested. That's in short. I can speak hours about that. Alignment of qualifications with Civvy Street. And obviously, with regards to EXA and others, there's professional bodies that guide us as well. And we have to fall within the occupational health and safety and all that type of thing. They say it reduces corruption, but it can add to corruption. Colonel Ralph put that in. He might be listening to what I'm saying, but it doesn't reduce it.